When archaeologists first uncovered the mysterious site of Göbekli Tepe in southeastern Turkey, they were not prepared for what they would find. The soil revealed massive stone pillars arranged in circles, each carved with animals and symbols, each carefully aligned with the stars. The dating of the site shocked the academic world, for it was built more than 11,000 years ago, long before the birth of agriculture, long before the rise of any city, and long before writing or organized religion, according to the official story. Humanity at that time was still living as simple hunter-gatherers, wandering the landscape in small groups, barely surviving. Yet the evidence at Göbekli Tepe tells a different tale, a tale of planning, of organization, and of spiritual sophistication. It is a story that does not fit into the neat timeline of history. The pillars of Göbekli Tepe rise up to 20 feet in height, weighing several tons. To move such stones requires planning, labor, and tools. Yet history tells us that stoneworking of this complexity did not exist until much later. The carvings on the stones show lions, snakes, vultures, and abstract symbols, suggesting a symbolic language, perhaps even an early form of writing. The entire site seems designed with astronomical knowledge, aligning with certain constellations in the sky. This level of sophistication is supposed to belong to civilizations thousands of years later. But here it stands, carved into the bedrock of prehistory, a monument that whispers of forgotten builders. Mainstream scholars insist that hunter-gatherers built Göbekli Tepe, but the question arises, why would they? Survival is supposed to be their only concern. Finding food, avoiding predators, sheltering from the cold. Yet here they dedicated immense effort to building a sacred site. The mainstream explanation is that religion came first, inspiring people to settle, and then farming followed. But what if it is the other way around? What if the people who built Göbekli Tepe were the survivors of an earlier civilization, already in possession of advanced knowledge, rebuilding fragments of their lost culture? What if Göbekli Tepe is not a beginning, but an echo? The layout of Göbekli Tepe is not random. The enclosures are carefully designed, some shaped like giant circles, others like rectangles. At the center of each stand, two massive T-shaped pillars, towering over the smaller stones, carved with human-like features, hands folded across the body, belts and even garments. These central pillars seem to represent beings, perhaps gods, perhaps ancestors, perhaps teachers from another age. The entire arrangement feels like a temple or a meeting place, a site of ritual and memory, built not by primitive wanderers, but by people with purpose and vision. What makes the site even more mysterious is that it was deliberately buried. Around 8,000 years ago, after centuries of use, the builders filled the site with earth and debris, hiding it from sight. Why would they do this? Some suggest it was to preserve the sanctity of the site. Others suggest they feared something, perhaps an approaching catastrophe, perhaps enemies, perhaps even the judgment of the heavens. By burying it, they ensured its survival, waiting for future generations to uncover the stones and remember. Yet, when it was finally uncovered in our modern age, we were not ready to accept what it implied, for it meant rewriting the beginning of civilization. Consider the effort required. The quarries from which the stones were cut are hundreds of feet away. The stones had to be transported without wheels, without beasts of burden, without metal tools, at least according to mainstream history. Yet the builders succeeded, not only in moving them, but in carving them with astonishing detail. Vultures with outstretched wings, foxes running across the stone, snakes intertwining, abstract shapes that resemble constellations. The work is not crude, it is masterful, as though carved by people already experienced in art and stonework, people with a long tradition behind them, not beginners discovering skill for the first time. The implications are profound. If hunter-gatherers could build Göbekli Tepe, then our entire understanding of human development collapses. It would mean that humans at that stage were far more advanced than we believed, capable of monumental architecture, symbolic thought, and astronomical calculation. If that is the case, then the neat division of prehistory and history, of primitive and civilized, is an illusion. Instead, we must accept that humanity's story is older, more complex, and filled with forgotten chapters. There are those who suggest that Göbekli Tepe is evidence of a lost civilization, perhaps survivors of the last ice age who carried knowledge with them, fragments of astronomy, engineering, and ritual. Perhaps they gathered in this region to preserve what they could, to rebuild after a Shimingxia catastrophe that erased their world. This would explain the sudden appearance of agriculture in the same region, as though farming was not invented from nothing, but reintroduced by those who already knew it. Perhaps the Fertile Crescent was chosen not by chance, but because survivors brought seeds, skills, and traditions from their lost homeland. The carvings at Göbekli Tepe also suggest a connection to the stars. Some researchers believe the vulture stone represents a map of the sky, depicting constellations as they appeared around 10,800 years ago. Remarkably, this corresponds to the period of the Younger Dryas, a time of sudden climate change, when temperatures shifted dramatically, when glaciers melted, and when floods swept across continents. Could it be that Göbekli Tepe commemorates a catastrophe, that its builders were recording the sky at the moment of destruction, passing down a warning to future generations? If so, then the site is not only a temple, but a memory of survival. The deliberate burial of the site reinforces this idea. Perhaps the builders knew that their age was ending, that their knowledge could not be preserved in writing, so they buried their greatest monument, hoping that one day it would be uncovered. A message across time. If this is true, then Göbekli Tepe is not an anomaly, but a key to understanding that history as we know it is incomplete, and that humanity's beginning is not the simple story of evolution and invention, but of rise, fall, and remembrance. Mainstream history struggles to explain why such a site exists. Some argue that the effort of building it united tribes, sparking cooperation that led to farming. Yet this feels like forcing the evidence to fit the narrative, not allowing the evidence to shape the narrative. For if Göbekli Tepe is accepted at face value, then it means that civilization did not begin 5,000 years ago, but at least 6,000 years earlier, and perhaps much more. The reluctance to accept this is not because of lack of evidence, but because of fear. Fear of rewriting the story that has been taught for generations. Fear of admitting that we do not know who we truly are. The mystery deepens when we compare Göbekli Tepe with other ancient sites, the megalithic temples of Malta, the stone structures of Jericho, and the mysterious alignments at Nabta Playa in Egypt, all older than expected, all suggesting advanced planning. If such sites exist across the world, then perhaps they are remnants of the same lost culture, a culture that spread knowledge across continents, leaving fragments in Turkey, in Egypt, in South America, in India, each piece part of a puzzle we have yet to solve. Göbekli Tepe may simply be the most dramatic example because it was preserved so well. In the end, the question is simple. If hunter-gatherers could not have built Göbekli Tepe with the tools and knowledge we assume they had, then who did? And where did they come from? The site itself provides no clear answers, only silence, stone, and carvings. Yet perhaps that is the point. Perhaps the builders wanted us to wonder, to question, to look beyond the official story and imagine possibilities. Forbidden History asks us to consider that Göbekli Tepe is evidence of humanity's forgotten past, evidence that our beginning is not what we think. Thus, part 2 of this journey reminds us that anomalies cannot be ignored. They are the cracks in the wall of official history, and through those cracks shines the light of truth. Göbekli Tepe stands not only as a monument to the past, but as a challenge to the present, a whisper from 11,000 years ago telling us that the story is bigger, deeper, and far more mysterious than we dare to believe. What if the story we have been told about the beginning of humanity is not the full story? What if the textbooks that we grew up memorizing, the neat timelines that start with primitive hunter-gatherers and move toward agriculture and the rise of civilizations, are only fragments of something far older and far stranger? The comfort of a simple linear history is easy to believe. It offers us the sense that we have advanced in a steady climb from ignorance toward enlightenment, from darkness toward light. Yet, the deeper we look, the more we realize that this version may be a carefully chosen narrative rather than the absolute truth, because beneath the soil, under the seas, and within ancient myths lie clues that challenge the very foundation of what we think we know. The accepted story says that modern humans emerged in Africa around 200,000 years ago, that they spread slowly across the continents, surviving as small bands of hunter-gatherers, only discovering farming about 10,000 years ago, and then gradually building cities, inventing writing, and forming empires. In this view of history, everything before 10,000 years ago is primitive, chaotic, and largely unimportant. But is that really the truth, or is it a convenient simplification that ignores evidence which does not fit? What if our real beginning is far older? What if humanity is not simply a story of slow progress, but of cycles, of rise and collapses, of knowledge gained and lost? What if the great civilizations we know are not the first, but only the most recent? Throughout the world we find anomalies, artifacts that do not belong to their time, structures that seem far too advanced for the people who supposedly built them, texts that speak of golden ages and of gods who walked among men. Every culture tells myths of floods, of destruction, of the sky opening and fire raining down, or of stars guiding the chosen few to survive. Mainstream historians classify these as legends, yet the similarities are too consistent to be coincidence. Could they instead be memories, fragmented recollections of real events that occurred long before our current history began? When we consider forbidden history, we are not dismissing science. Rather, we are asking questions that science itself hesitates to ask. Why do we assume that civilization only began around 5,000 years ago? Why do we assume that humans before that were incapable of advanced thought? Why do we ignore the possibility that knowledge existed and was lost, that humanity is not the product of one continuous climb, but the survivor of countless forgotten ages? It is a frightening idea because it removes the comfort of progress. It suggests that our future too could collapse, that nothing is guaranteed. Take, for example, Göbekli Tepe in modern Turkey, a site dated to over 11,000 years ago, long before agriculture, long before any official city. Yet it consists of massive stone pillars, intricately carved with animals and symbols, aligned with the stars. Mainstream archaeologists reluctantly admit it is the world's first temple, but how can supposedly primitive hunter-gatherers create such monumental architecture? The skills required, the planning, the organization, all imply knowledge far beyond what they were supposed to have. What if Göbekli Tepe is not the beginning of civilization, but the remnant of one that already existed, hidden from memory? Another question arises when we look at maps such as the Piri race chart, drawn in the 16th century, yet showing coastlines of continents with shocking accuracy, including Antarctica without ice, something that should have been impossible, for that requires knowledge of geography thousands of years old. Is it possible that ancient navigators mapped the world long before history allows, and that fragments of their charts were preserved and passed down? This single anomaly hints at the possibility of a global civilization that predated known history, one capable of exploring the seas at a time when our ancestors were supposedly barely learning to plant crops. Myths from around the world also complicate the official story. The Sumerians, who created the earliest known writing, spoke of gods called the Anunnaki, who came from the heavens and shaped humanity. In India, the Vedas describe flying machines called Vimanas, capable of traveling across skies and even into space. The Bible speaks of giants, the Nephilim, who walked among men in ancient times. Are all these tales pure invention, or are they distorted memories of encounters with beings whose influence is buried in our forgotten past? Forbidden History dares to consider the possibility that these myths are not fantasy, but fragments of truth. If humanity's beginning was guided, altered, or even engineered by beings beyond our current understanding, then the linear tale of evolution is incomplete. Perhaps humans are both natural and unnatural, both children of Earth and the result of interventions. If this is true, then our identity as a species must be reimagined. We are not simply the smartest animal that climbed to the top, but the inheritors of a destiny written long before we remember. The story of Atlantis, told by Plato, is another piece of this forbidden puzzle. He described a great civilization that had immense power and knowledge, one that fell because of arrogance and corruption, swallowed by the sea. His tale is often dismissed as allegory, yet he insisted it came from Egyptian priests, who themselves claimed to have records far older than Greek history. Modern discoveries of submerged ruins, from Yonaguni in Japan to structures off the coast of Cuba, suggest that great cities may indeed have been lost to rising seas at the end of the last ice age. What if Atlantis, or civilizations like it, were real, and what we call the beginning of history is simply the aftermath of their destruction? The fear of rewriting history is profound, because to admit that the official story is incomplete is to admit that the foundations of our worldview are fragile. Religions may lose their authority. Science may have to face mysteries it cannot explain, and humanity itself would have to accept that we are far older, far stranger, and perhaps far more vulnerable than we imagine. Forbidden History is not simply about ancient stones and artifacts. It is about identity, about what it means to be human, and about the possibility that our story is not a simple beginning, but a cycle of creation, destruction, and rebirth. As we begin this journey, we must keep an open mind. We must be willing to entertain ideas that challenge the orthodox narrative, not to believe blindly, but to question honestly. Because questioning is the root of discovery, and discovery is the root of truth. What if history got humanity's beginning all wrong? What if the story of who we are and where we came from is waiting to be rediscovered in the ruins, in the myths, and in the secrets long buried beneath the sands of time? In the year 1929, a group of scholars examined an old rolled piece of gazelle skin in the Topkapi Palace in Istanbul. The map they unrolled bore the signature of Piri Reis, a Turkish admiral and cartographer from the early 16th century. At first glance, it seemed like any other map of the time, showing the outlines of South America and parts of Africa. But as they looked closer, the astonishment grew, for the map displayed coastlines with uncanny accuracy, far more accurate than European maps of that century should have been, and most shocking of all, it appeared to show the coastline of Antarctica, not covered in ice, but free and detailed, a feat that modern cartographers would only achieve after aerial surveys in the 20th century. How could a man living in the early 1500s possess such knowledge? According to his own notes written on the margins, Piri Reis did not create the map from scratch. He compiled it from older charts, some from Arab sources, some from Portuguese explorers, and crucially, some from maps so ancient that even he did not know their origin. He admitted that parts of the map came from records dating back to the time of Alexander the Great, and perhaps even earlier. If this is true, then the Piri Reis map is not only a remarkable artifact of Ottoman navigation, but a window into knowledge inherited from civilizations long forgotten. The depiction of South America is strikingly precise, showing its eastern coast with near-modern accuracy at a time when Europeans had only barely begun to explore it. The rivers, the curves of the coastline, all drawn with confidence. Even more mysterious is the representation of Antarctica, not only shown far before its official discovery in 1820, but shown as though it were free of ice, something that would place its cartographic origin at least thousands of years ago, during a period when Antarctica was indeed ice-free along the coast, which modern science places over 6,000 years before the rise of known civilizations. This raises a question that mainstream history cannot easily answer. Who mapped the world in such detail so long ago? Skeptics argue that the supposed Antarctica on the map is a misinterpretation, that it is merely a distorted view of South America extended too far. Yet others note that the outline matches the subglacial topography of Queen Maud Land beneath the ice, something not visible to modern explorers until radar surveys in the 20th century. If the map truly reflects this hidden coast, then whoever created the original charts possessed not only knowledge of navigation, but advanced surveying techniques, perhaps even aerial observation, an idea that pushes the boundaries of what we consider possible in ancient times. Let us imagine the implications. If ancient seafarers possessed global knowledge, then the history of exploration must be rewritten. Rather than beginning with Columbus or the Portuguese navigators, global exploration may stretch back into the deep past, to an age when seafaring civilizations mapped the coasts of continents, traveled across oceans, and preserved their knowledge in charts. Charts that were copied and recopied, surviving through fragments, until they reached Piri Reis. If this is true, then the question follows: who were these forgotten explorers, and why has history erased their names? The existence of other anomalous maps strengthens the case. The Oronteus Phineas map of 1531 also shows Antarctica ice free. The Boachi map of the 18th century depicts subglacial rivers. The Zeno map shows parts of the North Atlantic with surprising accuracy. These maps, scattered through centuries, all hint at a source of knowledge far older, like echoes of a master chart passed down through time, perhaps created by a civilization that thrived before the end of the last ice age. A civilization capable of circumnavigating the globe when our ancestors were supposedly still learning how to farm mainstream. Scholars tend to dismiss these anomalies as coincidences, errors, or imaginative distortions, but the consistency across multiple maps suggests otherwise. It suggests that an advanced cartographic tradition once existed, one lost to us now, preserved only in fragments. The Piri Reis map is therefore more than ink on skin. It is a whisper of forbidden history, a hint that our ancestors may have sailed further, known more, and remembered less than we can imagine. The question then arises: how could such exploration have been possible? The mainstream view insists that seafaring before the Phoenicians was limited to coasts and short journeys. Yet even Polynesians crossed vast stretches of the Pacific, using only stars and currents. If they could do it with no metal, no compasses, then why not imagine others, even older, who sailed the Atlantic, who mapped Antarctica, who left traces of their journeys in stories of gods arriving from across the sea, gods with beards, gods bringing knowledge. Perhaps these were not gods at all, but sailors, remnants of a forgotten maritime age. The presence of flood myths in nearly every culture may connect to this. Perhaps rising seas at the end of the Ice Age drowned the ports and cities of this lost seafaring civilization, submerging their records, leaving only fragments of charts that survived in secret, handed down through Egyptians, Phoenicians, Greeks, Arabs, until finally reaching Piri Reis. If this is the case, then the discovery of the map is not an accident, but a revelation, a piece of evidence slipped through the cracks of history, reminding us that our beginnings may not be where we think. Thus, the Piri Reis map forces us to ask uncomfortable questions. If humanity in the deep past possessed global knowledge, then what else did they know? If they could map continents with accuracy, could they also measure the stars? Could they have understood mathematics, astronomy, perhaps even technologies that we cannot yet imagine? The silence of the past does not answer, but the map remains an undeniable artifact, daring us to look beyond the walls of orthodox history. Throughout history, myths and sacred texts have shaped our understanding of who we are and where we came from. They tell stories of gods descending from the sky, of giants walking the earth, of flying machines soaring above ancient battlefields. Mainstream scholars label these tales as symbolic, mere imagination of early cultures trying to explain natural forces. Yet when read side by side, the similarities across continents are striking, too precise to dismiss as coincidence. What if these stories are not pure invention, but distorted memories of real events? What if humanity's beginning was shaped by encounters with beings who were not quite human? The Sumerians, one of the earliest known civilizations, recorded their myths on clay tablets in cuneiform script. Among these stories lies the tale of the Anunnaki, beings described as those who came from the heavens to the earth. They were portrayed as powerful, long-lived, and responsible for teaching humanity skills of civilization. Some interpretations even suggest that they engineered mankind itself, shaping humans to serve as workers and companions. Mainstream historians prefer to read the Anunnaki as mere deities, symbols of natural forces. Yet the detailed descriptions, the genealogies, the accounts of journeys between heaven and earth suggest more than abstract imagination. Zechariah Sitchin, though controversial, argued that the Sumerian texts describe the Anunnaki as actual visitors from another world, beings who genetically modified early humans, creating Homo sapiens from primitive ancestors. In his view, the gods of Sumer were flesh and blood entities, advanced but not divine, and humanity is their legacy. Though many scholars reject his translations, the idea continues to resonate because it explains the sudden appearance of advanced knowledge in Sumer, writing, mathematics, astronomy, irrigation, all arising as if delivered fully formed. Could it be that these gifts were indeed taught rather than invented? Meanwhile, in the Hebrew Bible, we find the story of the Nephilim, described in Genesis as the offspring of the sons of God and the daughters of men, giants who lived on the earth in those days, beings of immense stature and power, whose presence was linked to corruption and violence, leading to the Great Flood. Again, mainstream theology interprets the Nephilim as symbolic, or as exaggerations of powerful rulers. Yet the similarity to other traditions of giants, from Greek mythology with its titans, to Norse myths of frost giants, to Native American legends of red-haired giants, suggests a universal memory of beings who truly walked among humans. Archaeological whispers of giant skeletons have circulated for centuries, though rarely admitted into official records. Reports from the 19th and early 20th centuries describe enormous bones unearthed in North America, in Europe, and in Asia, often quickly removed or dismissed as errors. Whether real or not, the persistence of these stories echoes the mythic accounts, raising the question, if the Nephilim were more than metaphor, who were they, and what role did they play in shaping humanity's earliest chapters? Across the world in India, the Vedic texts describe Vimanas, flying chariots of the gods, machines capable of traveling through the skies, even between planets. Detailed passages describe their construction, their weapons, and their battles. Some texts speak of cities destroyed by fire from the sky, events that sound eerily like descriptions of modern warfare, yet they were written thousands of years ago. Mainstream scholars treat them as poetic metaphors, but to others, they are evidence of advanced technology in the deep past, perhaps preserved knowledge from a lost civilization, or evidence of contact with beings possessing technology beyond our own. Taken together, these traditions paint a picture of humanity's beginnings, intertwined with beings of power and knowledge. Whether we call them gods, giants, or visitors, they appear again and again, teaching, guiding, or dominating, and then vanishing, leaving humanity to carry on. Perhaps with fragments of their wisdom, perhaps forever wondering what happened. If these stories are indeed based on real encounters, then our history is not simply the story of humans rising from the mud, but of humans shaped, taught, and perhaps created by something greater. When Plato wrote of Atlantis more than 2,000 years ago, he described a civilization so advanced, so powerful, and so prosperous that it rivaled all other nations of his time. In the dialogues of Timaeus and Critias, he explained that Atlantis lay beyond the Pillars of Hercules in the great ocean, and that it was a mighty island empire, rich with resources, skilled in navigation, and guided by kings who were descended from both gods and men. It was a utopia of knowledge and wealth, yet it fell into corruption, pride, and war, and in a single day and night of misfortune, the island was swallowed by the sea. For centuries, scholars have debated whether Plato invented the story as an allegory, a moral tale about hubris and downfall, or whether he was recording a memory of a real place. Plato insisted that his account came from Egyptian priests who told the story to the Greek lawgiver Solon, who passed it down to his descendants. According to these priests, the story of Atlantis was already thousands of years old when Solon heard it, and it described events that occurred 9,000 years before the time of Plato. If true, this would place Atlantis in the period near the end of the last ice age, a time of dramatic climate change, floods, and rising seas, conditions perfectly suited for the destruction of a great coastal civilization. Mainstream historians dismiss Atlantis as fiction, yet the persistence of flood myths across the world and the discovery of ancient ruins beneath the seas suggests that Plato's account may not be entirely invention. What if Atlantis was not a single island, but a memory of a network of civilizations that thrived along the coast during the Ice Age, when sea levels were hundreds of feet lower than today? As the ice melted, their cities would have been swallowed, their ports drowned, their temples lost beneath the waves. Only myths and fragments would remain, passed down by survivors who wandered inland to rebuild. Archaeological discoveries support the possibility. Off the coast of Japan lies Yonaguni, a submerged structure with steps, terraces, and pillars. Some argue it is natural, but its sharp edges and deliberate design suggest otherwise. In the Caribbean near Cuba, sonar has revealed what appear to be stone blocks and pyramids deep underwater. In India's Gulf of Cambay, divers have found the remains of walls and streets more than 7,000 years old. These are not isolated cases. From the Mediterranean to Southeast Asia, ruins beneath the sea hint at civilizations that thrived before the waters rose. If these were fragments of Atlantis, then Plato's story may have preserved a memory of real events. The description of Atlantis itself is remarkable. Plato spoke of concentric rings of land and water, with canals, bridges, and harbors, an organized city designed for both beauty and function. He described temples covered in gold and silver, statues of immense size, and technologies of irrigation and navigation. He claimed that Atlantis conquered lands as far as Egypt and beyond, but eventually its greed led to its downfall. This tale mirrors other myths of golden ages, followed by catastrophe, suggesting that it may be part of a larger memory of a lost era of human greatness. If Atlantis truly existed, then its destruction would explain the sudden appearance of advanced knowledge in later civilizations, Survivors could have carried fragments of their wisdom to Egypt, to Mesopotamia, to Mesoamerica, teaching agriculture, astronomy, and architecture. This would explain why pyramids and megalithic structures appear across the world with striking similarities. Why myths of a great flood are shared from the Bible to the Epic of Gilgamesh to the Popol Vuh of the Maya, all pointing to a single catastrophic event that ended an age and began another. The reluctance to accept Atlantis as history is understandable, for it challenges the linear narrative of civilization. It suggests that humanity is far older, that we have risen to greatness before and fallen, that we are not the first, but perhaps the latest in a series of cycles. To admit this would mean that our achievements are not unique, but inherited, that our future too may hold collapse, just as it did for those who came before. Forbidden history dares us to imagine this possibility, to look beneath the seas and into the myths, and to wonder if Atlantis was more than a dream. Across every continent, in every culture, legends speak of giants, beings of enormous size and strength who lived alongside humans in the distant past. In the Hebrew Bible, they are called the Nephilim. In Greek myths, they appear as titans. In Norse traditions, they are frost giants. In Native American lore, they are red-haired giants of great cruelty. In Africa, Australia, and the Pacific Islands, stories of giant ancestors persist, always described as taller, stronger, and older than ordinary men. Mainstream history dismisses these accounts as folklore, exaggerations born from fear or imagination, but the universality of the stories demands attention. For why would cultures separated by oceans invent the same archetype if it had no root in truth? Reports of giant skeletons have surfaced for centuries, particularly in the 19th and early 20th centuries. Newspapers in the United States once carried stories of massive bones uncovered in burial mounds, skeletons measuring 8, 10, even 12 feet tall, some with double rows of teeth, others with elongated skulls, though most of these accounts disappeared from mainstream archaeology, archived away or labeled as hoaxes. Their persistence adds weight to the legends. For ordinary farmers and workers had little reason to invent such tales, and many described their finds in detail before the remains were swiftly removed by authorities. The Smithsonian Institution has often been accused of hiding such evidence, though official records deny it. The suspicion lingers, fueling the forbidden history narrative. In South America, myths of giants abound. The Patagons of Argentina were described by early explorers as towering people of great size. Magellan himself wrote of them. In Peru and Ecuador, oral traditions tell of Viracocha, giant beings who once ruled. In North America, tribes spoke of battles with red-haired giants who devoured human flesh. Some accounts even describe alliances where giants taught skills or demanded tribute. The theme of conflict is common, suggesting that if giants existed, their relationship with humanity was uneasy, sometimes admired, often feared, always remembered. In the Middle East, the land of ancient Sumer and Canaan, stories of giants permeate the texts. The Epic of Gilgamesh describes Gilgamesh himself as 2/3 divine and 1/3 human, a man of extraordinary size and power. In the Bible, figures like Og of Bashan and Goliath are described as immense warriors. The Book of Enoch, though excluded from the canon, speaks in detail of fallen angels mating with human women and producing giants whose violence filled the earth and brought about the Great Flood. This motif of hybrid beings, part divine, part human, and enormous in stature, is echoed across cultures, perhaps pointing to a real population of beings remembered as giants. Archaeological discoveries outside official recognition also hint at such beings. In Lovelock Cave in Nevada, legends of the Paiute people told of battles with red-haired giants who lived in the caves. Early excavations uncovered massive sandals, large tools, and unusually large bones. though most disappeared into collections. Some artifacts remain. In the Middle East, enormous stone beds have been found in ruins, far larger than what ordinary humans would use. In Ireland and Britain, megalithic tombs are often associated with giant builders. Legends say the stones were carried by beings of immense strength, and perhaps such legends were based on memory rather than fantasy. Skeptics argue that tales of giants can be explained by exaggeration, by misidentified bones of large animals such as mastodons, or by the human tendency to tell heroic stories. But the global consistency remains a problem. How did distant cultures all imagine not only giants, but giants with similar traits: great height, unusual teeth, red hair, battles with humans, and eventual destruction? The pattern is too coherent to dismiss as pure coincidence. Perhaps the memory of giants is a cultural echo of a real race of beings, either a branch of humanity now extinct or hybrids created through means we do not yet understand. If giants truly existed, what does that mean for the beginning of humanity? Could they have been remnants of an earlier species, perhaps stronger and larger than us, eventually replaced by modern humans? Or could they have been the offspring of unions between humans and beings described as gods, as the Book of Enoch suggests? If so, then humanity's early story is not only about survival, but about interaction with others who were different, larger, perhaps more powerful beings whose presence forced us to adapt, to fight, to remember, and to record their existence in myths. The disappearance of giants from history may reflect more than extinction. It may reflect deliberate erasure. If early archaeology uncovered bones that did not fit the accepted narrative, it would be easier to hide them than to explain them, to preserve the neat linear story of evolution, rather than admit to anomalies. Forbidden history suggests that this has happened, that institutions have chosen silence over chaos, yet the myths remain. The bones occasionally surface, and the memory of giants continues to haunt us, as though reminding us that our history is not only human, but shared. Thus, the legends of giants are not merely curiosities, they are warnings, evidence of a chapter in human history that does not fit the textbooks, evidence that our world was once home to beings now vanished, beings remembered with awe and fear, beings who may hold the key to understanding our true origins. Across the face of the earth stand monuments so vast, so precise, and so mysterious that they defy the simple explanations offered by conventional history. The great pyramids of Egypt rising from the desert with perfect alignment to the stars, the colossal stones of Baalbek in Lebanon, each weighing hundreds of tons, the cyclopean walls of Peru, where massive blocks fit together so tightly that not even a blade of grass can pass between them. These structures are credited to ancient peoples with simple tools, copper chisels, wooden rollers, and sheer manpower. Yet the scale and precision seem to suggest otherwise. Perhaps they are the remnants of a knowledge now lost, technology forgotten, a whisper of a civilization older than the one we know. Take the Great Pyramid of Giza, towering nearly 500 feet into the sky, aligned to true north with astonishing accuracy. Its base forming a perfect square within fractions of an inch. For centuries, Egyptologists have explained its construction as the work of thousands of laborers dragging limestone blocks with ropes and ramps. Yet the sheer number of stones, more than 2 million blocks each, weighing several tons, placed with precision over a span of 20 years, strains credibility, even with modern machinery. Such a feat would be daunting. The mathematics of the pyramid, its proportions reflecting pi and the golden ratio, its alignment to the constellation Orion, all suggest a level of knowledge far beyond what the old Kingdom Egyptians are supposed to have possessed. If they did not build it alone, then who did? And when legends from Egypt itself speak of Zep Tepi, the first time, an age when gods walked the earth and built the great monuments. Mainstream scholars dismiss this as mythology, yet perhaps it preserves the memory of a lost era, a civilization predating dynastic Egypt, whose knowledge of engineering and astronomy was later inherited by the pharaohs. If true, then the pyramids are not tombs as we are told, but relics of a forgotten science, perhaps power stations, perhaps observatories, perhaps messages written in stone for future generations to decipher. In Lebanon lies Baalbek, where the ruins of a Roman temple stand upon a foundation. Far older, the stones of the Trilithon, each weighing more than 800 tons, rest upon even larger blocks, some estimated at over 1,000 tons. The Romans built many wonders, but they did not move stones of such size. The quarry nearby holds an unfinished block of nearly 1,200 tons, abandoned as though even the ancient builders could not complete it. How were these stones moved? With what tools? Mainstream explanations speak of sledges and manpower. Yet the logistics seem impossible unless the builders possessed a method of lifting and moving beyond what we understand. Perhaps harnessing techniques now forgotten, or technologies no longer available to us. In South America, the walls of Sacsayhuaman near Cusco rise with immense stones, some over 100 tons, cut into irregular shapes and fitted together like a jigsaw puzzle. The stones have no mortar, yet they interlock with precision, their surfaces polished as if softened before being set into place. Legends of the Inca tell of Viracocha, a godlike figure who brought knowledge and ordered the construction, but the Inca themselves admitted they did not build these walls, that they inherited them from those who came before. If that is true, then the question remains, who were these master builders, and what methods did they use? The same mystery extends to other megaliths. Stonehenge in England aligned with solstices, Karnak in France with rows of standing stones stretching for miles, Nan Madol in Micronesia, built on artificial islets of basalt columns, Easter Island with its moai statues, each site unique, yet all sharing the theme of massive stones moved and arranged with knowledge of astronomy and geometry. Mainstream archaeology insists on primitive tools and persistence, yet the scale of these projects suggests something more, something hidden beneath the sands of time. If we consider the possibility that these structures were built with lost technology, what could it have been? Some theorists suggest that ancient peoples understood acoustic levitation, using sound to move heavy stones. Others suggest knowledge of magnetism or resonance, methods of reducing weight or harnessing forces unknown to modern science, though speculative. Such ideas explain what brute force cannot. Perhaps the builders tapped into natural energies of the earth, aligning their monuments with ley lines, using vibration to shape and move stone. If so, then the megaliths are not only monuments, but machines, functioning as part of a network of energy across the globe. The similarity of myths across cultures supports this. Stories of gods who taught men to build, of sky beings who descended with wisdom, of golden ages when knowledge flowed freely. Perhaps the pyramids and megaliths are the physical evidence of this age, built by or with the guidance of those beings, later inherited by civilizations that could not replicate them but revered them as sacred. In this way, the structures became temples, tombs, and symbols, but their true purpose may have been forgotten. Mainstream history resists such interpretations, insisting that human ingenuity alone explains these wonders. But the question remains, why do so many ancient sites show levels of precision that rival modern engineering? Why do they align with stars, solstices, and mathematical constants? Why are they so similar across continents separated by oceans? Forbidden history suggests that these are not coincidences, but remnants of a shared knowledge, a knowledge once global, now fractured and hidden. If humanity once possessed or inherited such technology. Its loss would explain the sudden gap between the grandeur of megalithic structures and the cruder buildings that followed. Perhaps a catastrophe ended the age of master builders, leaving survivors who preserved fragments but could not replicate the whole. Thus, the pyramids stand as tombs of knowledge as much as monuments of stone, reminders that our beginning may not be a climb from ignorance, but a fall from greatness. All across the world, cultures tell of a great flood, a time when waters rose, when storms raged, and when nearly all of humanity was swept away. In the Bible, it is the story of Noah, building an ark to save his family and the animals. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, it is Utnapishtim who survives in a great boat. In Hindu tradition, it is Manu, warned by a divine fish, to build a vessel. In Native American stories, tribes speak of floods that covered mountains. In China, the legend of Yu the Great tells of taming waters that engulfed the land. These stories are separated by oceans and centuries, yet they echo the same memory, a catastrophic deluge that ended an age and began another. Mainstream historians interpret these myths as symbolic, representing seasonal floods or moral lessons. But the striking consistency across continents suggests something deeper. Perhaps they preserve a real event or series of events, when rising seas and violent storms destroyed civilizations, forcing survivors to carry the memory into myth. Geologists know that around 12,000 years ago, the Earth experienced dramatic changes. The end of the last ice age brought massive melting of glaciers. Sea levels rose more than 300 feet, coastlines vanished, entire landmasses disappeared beneath the waves. For people living, then it would have felt like the world itself was ending, and so they remembered, and they told their children, who told theirs until the memory became legend. The Younger Dryas period, beginning about 12,800 years ago, was marked by sudden cooling followed by rapid warming. Evidence suggests that massive floods swept across continents, such as the Missoula floods in North America, where walls of water hundreds of feet high carved valleys and carried boulders the size of houses. In the Middle East, shifts in climate may have drowned fertile lands, forcing migrations. In Asia, melting glaciers poured rivers into plains, drowning villages. The coincidence of geological data and myth is striking. Both point to a cataclysm at the dawn of our current age, a cataclysm that erased whatever civilizations may have existed before. If we imagine advanced cultures thriving along the coasts during the Ice Age, building cities and ports when sea levels were lower, then the floods would have destroyed them, submerging their monuments, erasing their records, leaving only survivors who fled inland, carrying fragments of knowledge, perhaps explaining the sudden appearance of farming, writing, and astronomy in later millennia. Perhaps those who became the Sumerians, the Egyptians, the Mayans were not inventing from nothing, but rebuilding from memory, guided by stories of what came before. The deliberate burial of sites like Göbekli Tepe may reflect this same trauma. Perhaps people knew the world was unstable, that the skies could darken and waters could rise. Perhaps they built monuments as warnings, records in stone to survive when their villages did not. If this is true, then the flood myths are not just allegories, they are testimonies, memories of real survivors who lived through the destruction of an age. Mainstream history resists this interpretation, for it implies that civilization is far older, that humanity did not rise in a single linear path, but in cycles, rising, thriving, and collapsing. The flood becomes the dividing line, the veil between ages. Before it, an advanced world; after it, the remnants, struggling to remember. This is a frightening idea, for it suggests that our own age too could end in catastrophe, that nature does not care for our progress, that in a single generation the seas could rise and sweep away our cities, just as they did before. Forbidden history insists that the Great Flood was real, that it destroyed a golden civilization, perhaps Atlantis, perhaps others we cannot name. The survivors became the culture bringers, the teachers remembered as gods, those who gave seeds, taught, laws, built temples, and aligned monuments with the stars. The myths we call religion may be echoes of their presence, the flood their legacy, the waters their erasure, and our world the continuation of their story. Among all the mysteries of forbidden history, none is more profound than the question of our very bodies, our very essence, the genetic code that makes us who we are. Mainstream science tells us that humans are the product of evolution, a long, slow process stretching back millions of years, from simple organisms to primates, and finally to Homo sapiens. Yet even within this story there are gaps, sudden leaps, and strange anomalies. The appearance of modern humans 200,000 years ago seems abrupt. Our brains expanded dramatically compared to our ancestors. Language appeared, symbolic thought emerged, and culture blossomed. Why did it happen so quickly? What caused the leap? Forbidden history dares to ask, was it natural or was it guided? The human genome contains mysteries that science itself admits are difficult to explain. We share much of our DNA with primates, yet the differences, though small in percentage, result in enormous cognitive and cultural leaps. It is as though a switch was flipped, as though a new blueprint was introduced. Some researchers have pointed to chromosome 2, which appears to be the result of a fusion event. 2 ancestral chromosomes joining into one, a rare occurrence that distinguishes us from other primates. Why did this fusion happen, and why did it result in such profound changes? Some argue it was chance. Others whisper that it looks more like design. Ancient myths echo this idea of intervention. The Sumerians spoke of the Anunnaki, who created mankind to serve them, molding clay and mixing it with the essence of the gods. The Bible speaks of God forming man from the dust of the earth and breathing life into him. The Egyptians told of Khnum shaping humans on his potter's wheel. The Popol Vuh of the Maya speaks of gods attempting to create man from various substance until they succeeded with corn. These stories, scattered across the world, all describe humanity as created, fashioned, or altered by beings with purpose. Rarely do they suggest we simply evolved on our own. Could it be that they preserved the memory of real events, encoded in myth to survive the ages? Modern geneticists have also puzzled over the sudden appearance of genes related to speech and cognition. The FOXP2 gene, for instance, linked to language, seems to have undergone rapid changes in humans compared to other species, as though selected or altered in a short span of time. Some researchers wonder how such complex traits could emerge so quickly. Forbidden history suggests that perhaps they did not emerge by chance. Perhaps they were introduced. Perhaps humanity was a project, an experiment, or a creation by beings we once called gods. This idea is uncomfortable for mainstream science, for it blurs the line between biology and myth, between evolution and design. Yet the evidence keeps raising questions. Why do humans seem maladapted in some ways? Our spines prone to injury, our babies unusually helpless at birth, our brains consuming so much energy. It is as though we are not fully suited to the environment of Earth, as though we were altered for purposes beyond survival in the wild. Some even speculate that we are hybrids, part terrestrial, part something else, a union of beings that created a new species. The legends of the Nephilim, the giants born of the sons of God and daughters of men, could reflect memories of such unions, beings mixing with humans to produce hybrids. Perhaps not always giants of stature, but giants in intellect, giants in power, their legacy encoded in our DNA. Perhaps this is why so many ancient texts emphasize bloodlines, genealogies, and purity. Perhaps some groups sought to preserve the spark of the gods within their lineage, giving rise to priest kings, pharaohs, and rulers who claimed descent from the divine. If this is true, then humanity's beginning was not accidental, but deliberate. We are not simply apes who grew clever. We are being shaped for purpose. Though the purpose itself remains mysterious, were we made to serve, to learn, to evolve towards something greater, or to continue the legacy of those who came before? The myths give hints but no certainty. They speak of service, of rebellion, of love and anger between gods and men. Perhaps we were not only created, but caught in a cosmic drama, participants in a story that began long before we were aware. Forbidden History asks us to look at ourselves, to see our bodies and minds not only as natural but as artifacts, evidence of intervention. If we are indeed designed, then the designers left their mark, written in our genes, waiting to be read. And though science may not yet admit it, the code itself whispers of mystery. A story older and stranger than evolution alone can tell. Whenever we question the official version of history, we find not only anomalies in the ground, but also patterns of silence, stories of discoveries that vanish, artifacts that are locked away, skeletons that disappear, reports that are ridiculed until they fade. It seems that when evidence threatens the accepted timeline, it rarely sees the light of day. Forbidden History is not only about what lies beneath the earth, but also about what has been deliberately concealed, and the question we must ask is why. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, newspapers across the United States reported the discovery of giant skeletons unearthed in burial mounds or caves. Farmers spoke of skulls larger than normal, bones far taller than any living man, some even with strange features like double rows of teeth. Again and again, these finds were said to be taken by institutions, often the Smithsonian, after which they disappeared. Official history today denies such skeletons exist, calling the reports exaggerations or hoaxes, yet the sheer volume of accounts, spread over decades and across states, makes the silence suspicious. Why would so many people invent the same story? Why did the bones vanish? Perhaps because their existence would force history to rewrite itself. Similar patterns emerge around anomalous artifacts. In coal mines, workers claim to find metallic spheres, hammers embedded in stone, objects that seemed manufactured yet locked in layers millions of years old. Such finds are quickly dismissed, labeled as misinterpretations, yet the reports linger, hinting that the Earth holds traces of technology that should not exist. In South America, elongated skulls from Paracas in Peru show cranial shapes far beyond normal human binding practices. DNA studies have raised more questions than answers, yet official explanations insist they are simply deformed humans, not another species. In Egypt, erosion patterns on the Sphinx suggest it may be thousands of years older than dynastic Egypt, exposed to rains that last fell in the region before the Sahara dried. Yet this interpretation is resisted because it would push civilization back into forbidden time. Why this resistance? Why the need to suppress? Part of the answer is fear. If history admits that advanced civilizations existed tens of thousands of years ago, or that humans were engineered, or that giants once walked the earth, then every school book, every museum, every national identity built on heritage must be rewritten. The authority of institutions would be shaken. The experts would lose control. For centuries, universities, museums, and religious orders have guarded the narrative of who we are, to preserve order, to prevent chaos. But in doing so, they have chosen silence over truth. There is also the matter of power. Knowledge is power. If evidence of lost civilizations or advanced technology were admitted, it might reveal secrets of energy, of building, of medicine, knowledge that could transform the modern world. But those who hold power rarely share it. Instead, they hide it, drip-feeding fragments while keeping the whole concealed. Some suggest that secret societies, orders that trace back to the Templars or beyond, have preserved fragments of forbidden history, passing them in symbols, in rituals, in hidden texts, while the masses are given myths and simplified stories. If this is true, then the suppression of knowledge is not accidental, but deliberate, a means of control. Yet the truth leaks in myths, in ruins, in maps like Piri Reis, in temples like Göbekli Tepe, in bones whispered of but never displayed. Forbidden history survives because it is woven into the fabric of human memory, too vast to be erased entirely, too stubborn to vanish. Each discovery is a reminder, a spark, telling us that the story we know is not complete, that there is more waiting beneath the surface. The guardians of history will always say that anomalies are mistakes, coincidences, or hoaxes. They will insist that the linear path from primitive caves to modern cities is secure. But their insistence itself betrays unease. For if the story were so strong, anomalies would not threaten it. The very effort to suppress suggests that the truth is fragile, that a single undeniable discovery could topple the entire structure. This is why forbidden history matters, because it asks us to see not only what is revealed, but also what is hidden, to look not only at the evidence, but at the silence surrounding it. If all the anomalies are real, if the ruins and maps and myths are more than imagination, if the bones of giants and the records of floods are fragments of a forgotten truth, then the question becomes impossible to ignore. Where did humanity truly come from? If history has told the story wrong, then what is the right story? Forbidden history invites us to imagine possibilities far larger than the textbooks allow, not with blind belief, but with curiosity and courage. For to ask where we came from is to ask who we are and who we may yet become. The mainstream view is simple. Humans evolved in Africa, spread across the continents, slowly built tools, and eventually discovered farming. But this view ignores the leaps, the sudden bursts of knowledge, the monuments that should not exist, the myths of beings who came from the sky, the memories of floods that wiped the earth clean. What if the true story is not linear, but cyclical? Civilizations rising to heights, collapsing in catastrophe. Survivors passing fragments to the next stage. What if humanity has walked this path many times, each time forgetting, each time believing itself? The first one possibility is that humanity is far older than we think. Perhaps not 200,000 years, but millions. Perhaps advanced civilizations existed long before the last ice age, building cities now buried beneath the sea, leaving traces in anomalous artifacts, a hammer in coal, a footprint in stone, a map that charts Antarctica. Without ice, if so, then modern humanity is not the beginning, but the continuation of an ancient lineage. We are the descendants of survivors who rebuilt after countless destructions. The myths of golden ages and floods are the memory of those cycles, encoded in story because writing had not yet been invented, or because the records were lost in fire and water. Another possibility is that humanity did not evolve alone, that we were shaped, guided, or even created by beings beyond our world. Call them gods, call them visitors, call them the Anunnaki, the Nephilim, the Watchers. The names differ, but the pattern is the same. Beings who descended, who taught, who mixed their essence with ours, who left behind monuments and myths, then vanished, leaving us to carry on. If so, then humanity is not merely the cleverest ape, but a hybrid, a species born of earth and something greater, a child of both clay and stars. This would explain the sudden leaps in knowledge, the obsession with bloodlines in ancient texts, the presence of myths about sky beings across every culture. If we are the children of the gods, then history has hidden our true parentage. There is also the idea that humanity is part of a cosmic cycle, not only rising and falling on Earth, but connected to forces beyond it, the precession of the equinoxes, the cycles of the stars, the movement of the solar system through the galaxy. Perhaps these cycles bring ages of light and darkness, of knowledge and ignorance. Perhaps civilizations rise when the heavens align and fall when they do not. Ancient texts from India speak of yugas, great ages lasting thousands of years. Golden, silver, bronze, and dark. Perhaps we live in such a cycle, and what we call history is only the latest descent from a forgotten golden age. If this is true, then humanity's beginning is not a single point, not a Garden of Eden or a cave in Africa, but a web of origins, part natural evolution, part intervention, part cycle. The truth may be all of these at once. We may be children of Earth shaped by time, refined by catastrophe, altered by others, rising and falling with the stars, and forgetting again and again until only myths remain. Forbidden history forces us to accept that certainty is an illusion, that our story is larger than we dare to imagine. What does this mean for us today? If we are older, if we are hybrids, if we are survivors, then our identity changes. We are not fragile accidents of nature, but inheritors of a vast and hidden legacy. We are not the first to build cities, to chart the stars, to dream of gods. We are the continuation of a story that began long before us. To know this is to feel both humility and awe. Humility because we are not as unique as we believe. Awe because we are part of something eternal, a dance of creation and destruction, memory and forgetting, written not only in stone, but in our very blood. The true beginning of humanity may never be fully known, but the clues are everywhere, in ruins that defy explanation, in myths that refuse to die, in maps that should not exist, in bones that vanish from museums, in genes that speak of sudden leaps. Each clue is a piece of a puzzle. Forbidden history tells us that the puzzle is real, even if incomplete, and that to deny it is to deny ourselves, for to know where we came from is to know what we are capable of becoming. If the story we have been taught about the beginning of humanity is wrong, then everything changes. The ruins in the deserts, the monuments beneath the seas, the myths of gods and floods, the bones that vanish into museums, all of them whisper a truth that is larger than the textbooks. The forbidden history we have explored is not simply about questioning details. It is about questioning the very foundation of who we are. For if our beginning has been miswritten, then our identity, our destiny, and our place in the universe are all different from what we have been told. Imagine for a moment that the anomalies are real, that Göbekli Tepe was not built by primitive hunters, but by survivors of a lost age, that the Piri Reis map preserves fragments of a world charted before the ice returned, that the myths of the Anunnaki and the Nephilim are not fantasies but memories of beings who shaped us, that Atlantis was real and drowned, that giants once walked the earth, that pyramids are not tombs but machines of stone, that floods destroyed a golden civilization, that our DNA holds evidence of design, that knowledge has been hidden not by accident but by intention. If all of this is true, then humanity's beginning is not a line, but a cycle, not a simple climb, but a spiral of light and darkness, of creation and destruction, of remembering and forgetting. The meaning of this realization is profound. First, it humbles us. We are not the peak of progress. We are not the first to build, to dream, to measure the stars. Others came before, perhaps greater, perhaps wiser, but they fell, swept away by floods, by fire, by time, their greatness erased, their memory surviving only in myth. To know this is to accept that we too could fall, that our skyscrapers and machines could vanish in a single catastrophe, leaving only whispers for future ages. We are not invincible, and our story is not guaranteed. Second, it empowers us. For if our ancestors were capable of such greatness, if they could move stones heavier than our cranes, align monuments with the heavens, sail oceans, map continents, preserve knowledge in myths, then so can we. Perhaps we are not rediscovering for the first time, but remembering, awakening to a legacy written into our blood. To know that humanity has risen before is to know that we can rise again, that within us lies potential beyond what we imagine. The pyramids and the ruins are not only reminders of loss, they are promises of possibility, signs that we carry the same spark. Third, it warns us, for the cycles of history show that civilizations fall. The Great Flood is not only a memory, it is a prophecy, a reminder that nature is larger than us, that the universe is not bound by our desires. If an advanced world could vanish before, then so can ours. And perhaps the greatest lesson of forbidden history is not pride, but caution, humility before the forces of earth and sky. To live in balance, to remember that power without wisdom leads to ruin, as it did for Atlantis, as it did for the giants, as it did for the golden age before the flood. Why then has history been written falsely? Why has the truth been hidden? Perhaps because those who hold power fear the consequences. Religion fears the loss of control. Academia fears the collapse of certainty. Nations fear the loss of pride. Yet truth cannot be hidden forever. The ruins are still there. The myths still told. The stars still aligned with ancient stones. Forbidden history is the voice of the earth itself, whispering through cracks in the official story, calling us to listen, to see, to awaken. Perhaps the time has come for humanity to face its own forgotten beginning. If we accept that history is wrong, then where do we truly come from? Perhaps from cycles stretching millions of years, perhaps from intervention by beings beyond our world, perhaps from both. Natural evolution and divine design intertwined. Perhaps we are hybrids of clay and star shaped by the earth, but guided by the heavens. Perhaps our destiny is not to remain bound by one story, but to embrace the mystery of many. For the truth may never be one answer, but a tapestry woven of evolution, catastrophe, memory, and creation. Humanity is not simple, and neither is our origin. The meaning of this for the future is immense. To know that we are older is to know that we are wiser than we think. To know that we are shaped is to know that we carry purpose. To know that we are survivors is to know that we can endure, but only if we learn, only if we remember. Forbidden history is not merely about the past, it is about the present and the future. It challenges us to rise, to seek truth, to preserve knowledge, so that when the next cycle comes, when the waters rise or the skies burn, humanity will not fall into forgetting again. Perhaps this is why myths endure, why monuments still stand, why whispers of gods and giants persist. Because the ancients wanted us to remember. They carved their warnings in stone. They aligned their temples to the stars. They passed their stories as myths, knowing that writing might fade, that books might burn. But stories are immortal. They cross generations. They carry truth hidden in allegory, waiting for ears to hear, eyes to see, hearts to awaken. Forbidden history is the call to listen, to look again, to see that the past is not dead. It is alive within us. So what if history got humanity's beginning all wrong? Then humanity is not what we think. We are not children of accident, but children of mystery. We are not the first, but the latest. We are not small, but vast. Our origin written in stars and seas, in floods and fire, in bones and myths, in ruins and in genes. And to know this is to stand at the threshold of awe, for the truth of our beginning is not forbidden. It is waiting for us to be brave enough to see it, to accept it, and to carry it forward into the ages to come. This is the lesson of forbidden history, that our beginning is not the end of the story, that every ruin is a reminder, every myth a memory, every anomaly a clue, that we are far more ancient, far more mysterious, and far more capable than we believe. The question is, not only where did we come from, but where will we go? Will we forget again, or will we finally remember? The answer lies not in the past alone, but in what we choose to do with the truth now. Thus, the forbidden history of humanity is not merely an alternate story. It is the true story, not written in textbooks, but written in the stones of forgotten temples, in the myths of flood and fire, in the silence of vanished bones, in the whispers of maps and stars. It is the story of a species that has risen, fallen, survived, and remembered. A story of creation and destruction, of gods and men, of giants and floods, of pyramids and lost seas. It is our story, and it is far from over.